governance issues, weak capacity to deliver social services, economies that have been characterized by rising debts, monocultural economy that doesn't allow too much diversification, rising insecurity, and failure to overcome. Is it slide? Sustainability, we have defined, of course, as long-term stable economic, social, and environmental future, where development and prosperity are assured as we move forward to address and protect our given prospects without our planet at the same time. The key challenges we face are couched in the 17 SDG goals. The pathway from fragility to sustainability forms the roadmap. The SDGs, as we all know, attempt to reduce poverty, improve access to healthcare and education, and of course mitigate climate change effects. And more importantly, as many Nigerians will tell you, to solve the insecurity, food insecurity problem. Take, for example, food and nutrition. The most basic right of human beings. Africa still is unable to feed itself, even though we have 65% of all arable land in the world. The region relies on imports and will remain so unless there is an urgent paradigmatic shift in the structures of African economies. Food import is costing Africa about $25 billion a year, and it's going to rise to about $110 billion by 2030. At the same time, and as Deputy Governor mentioned, there is rapid urbanization. Our cities are doubling in size. I always feel sorry for leaders of Lagos. And by 2050, it's going to be doubled. So again, putting pressure on infrastructure and services. According to the United Nations, about 735 million people are experiencing food insecurity globally, an increase of 122 million more since 2019, mostly in the fragile countries. Somalia, Afghanistan, Haiti, South Sudan, Yemen. And now many of our countries in West Africa are also on the red path of famine. And this is really why I want to dwell on the issue of fragility trap and why we should invest in these countries and why we need to change the situation. There are what I call a cascading crushing crisis situation. Food insecurity is not the only issue that's facing Africa. It's an outcome of other factors, including human insecurity, long-term neglect of the agricultural sector, and a lack of structural transformation. This term gets used a lot, but it's very real to what is happening to us. Citizens of the West African state of Niger woke up a few days ago to another ability food. I ascribe it to the kind of problem that we're going to be great. Now it's here. Okay. There are, of course, several measures to measuring this, what I call fragility trap, which are already enumerated. We are not able to feed ourselves. A number of West African countries have fallen into pools, not because they want to do pool, but because of certain mitigating factors. Both of these issues, food insecurity, human insecurity, and all of which we have seen both in our country, Nigeria, leads to what I call these traps. We are trapped because we are in this situation for a long time. And I'll show you some figures now. A middle-income trap is what many people are used to. It's a scenario where a country's economy is not able to transition to higher per capita income level. The low-income countries often tend to transition faster. We should have transitioned faster. Many people actually classify Nigeria as a low middle income. But when you look at the figures, we almost belong to the fragile countries. A distinct manner of low-income trap or fragility is the vulnerability that we face in food, in medicine, the resilience to changes, and all of the things that we see over the last, since COVID. When we had money, we couldn't buy drugs. because countries were prioritizing their own people. We actually had one. At the African Development Bank, we had 26-week straight meetings with all the 54 African countries every week with the president of the bank, trying to package, copy deals for these countries. We had money, but we couldn't buy drugs. To move from this track to sustainability, which is all about our sustainable future, we need to do several things. We need to address the trap that we have found ourselves in. I said earlier, for example, that 70% in other food, 70% of households in Africa and even in Nigeria make their living from subsistence agriculture. And this is the first point I need to make. Why do we find ourselves in this trap? Because Africa remains a place where you have this 70% smallholder farmers. There's nothing wrong with small, medium enterprises, but they are relative. Consul from Germany, from Denmark was talking about the country, and also Germany, made up of small, medium enterprises, but these are relative. When you talk about small farmers in Africa, like 2 acres, 1 hectare, 2 hectares, they can hardly feed their family with that level of farming. So we are caught in that trap of smallness. Small is not always beautiful. And they farm these farms, only rely on, for example, when it rains. When it doesn't rain, they are dead. Dear colleagues, it's a reality of many people. Households are effectively in quasi-subsistence. If this condition entraps people in perpetual poverty, in fact, I call it destitution equilibrium. It's a state in which the opposing forces, your income and expenditure, will just balance out. Once you spend it, there's nothing else to save. It's an equilibrium that is too close to subsistence, and we have to shift away from that equilibrium. The transition to a low-income to a medium income must begin with the kind of investment that we need to see. Africa cannot continue this narrative of a place where you only see small holders. How do we fix first? And what we need to fix first is what I call the food and agricultural system. For Africa to attain the development goal that we are all talking about, many things have to change. There has to be profound economic change in the landscape. The most profound one is that the economy will need to transform from rural-based to urban-based and commercial farming. As we speak, 25 million Nigerians are already at high risk of food insecurity this January. And I'm quoting figures from not just the FAO, but also the UN. By January 2023, we have 25 million people. This is an extreme case. These Nigerians, a count which is growing every day, will not be able to afford enough nutritious food every day. Those who can afford food, and listen to this, they pay 56% of their income on food, according to the data by the World Economic Forum. That is the highest that anyone pays for food in the world. In the US, people spend only about 6.2% of their income on food. In the UK, it's about 8.2%. This has to change. In other words, people are just not making enough income to do other things. All through history, agricultural development has been and remains one of the most powerful tools to end extreme poverty, to boost shared prosperity, and feed people. Fostering modern agriculture is therefore crucial to economic growth. But it faces a lot of challenges that many people have talked about: climate change, pests, conflicts, extreme weather, human insecurity. Therefore, sustainability will require changes. We need to strengthen the link between urban and rural areas. We need to shift the whole paradigm. The strategic actions Strategic action that we need to take will include all of those things that you see on the board. The point I would like to end up with, going forward, is that Africa will never be able to do all of the things that we are desiring without industrialization. And when I mean industrialization, I'm not talking about Africa making rockets and ships and so forth. The Africa meaning that we manufacture, we make the most basic things that we eat and for which we live our days every day. The future will be defined not by abundance of natural resources, but by human capital, science, technology, and how nations harness them for industrialization. Due to their strong industrial capabilities, rich nations manufacture what poor people, poor countries consume. The Nigerian example is telling. Tied closely to industrialization, and this is the point of it, is a problem we face currently, the balance of payment prices. What we see manifesting is a shortage of foreign exchange and the precipitous decline of the national currency. In large part because we consume high-value products that we do not produce, and we just export low-value raw materials. Nigerians, especially the urban elites, have developed an appetite for imports. Expensive luxury goods like you see about here. And you see at the same time, what we export are very low value. Consider the Nigerian oil and gas sector, for example. The historical loss of not having refineries is almost incalculable. Nigeria has the second largest reserve of oil in Africa, and yet a net importer of petrol and mineral products. It has the 9th largest gas reserve, and we can barely provide power for ourselves. The country in 2019, our benchmark before COVID, exported 27.7 billion worth of petroleum products, crude petroleum in 2020. While the value of our imports, notice this, was 71 billion. In other words, what we should be producing, we import and consume. The country has installed capacity, as you all know, of 4.5 million barrels in 2022. I did my national service at the Warri Refinery. I don't want to say which year. And at that time, almost 90% of the staff were Nigerians. In fact, we are at the cost of actually running that refinery all ourselves. I was one of those who went to the Jakarta Steel Company. We started together. We went there, we came back, we thought the plant would be finished by 1982, 1983. It never happened. Yeah. I was with the Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research for many years, and we used to monitor all the big projects, fertilizer in Kaduna, sugar in Basita, everywhere. All of those are gone. In other words, all the capital stock that we have are not performing. This is really the crux of the problem that we face. When we talk about impacts, we have to look at the fact that we don't have, for now, that capability we set our way. We are not making what we should be making. We are a 200 million people population. If your rate of import is far higher than your rate of export, you are going to run into balance of payment crisis. Check, for example, DRC, same problem. Coltan is indispensable to the creation of all modern technologies. Laptops, cell phones, video games, consoles, every one of them contain coltan. Congo, DRC holds 80% of global coltan deposits and produces 60% of world supply. Yet, it's one of the poorest nations on earth. Why? Because when you don't add value to what the raw material you have, it doesn't count. It's as simple as that. And adding woes to our problem is the unsustainable trade regimes that I mentioned. you cannot survive an indefinite foreign exchange crisis, which is caused by a propensity for consumption. The most effective strategy for us is the expansion of our foreign exchange, not managing foreign exchange, by production and by export. We have to move away through that journey. Agribusiness is one of those areas where you can make that difference. Agribusiness. I wrote a book somewhere years ago called Moving from Consumption to Production. And that was the argument in about 300 pages of this book, that we have to become a production nation, not a consumption nation that we are. According to the World Economic Forum, the food system, listen to this, the food system, I mean, just imagine the Cadbury, the Nestle, and all of this. The food system represents $10 trillion. That's over 12% of global GDP. Compared with the IT, for example, which is extremely important, it's about $1 trillion. It's 10 times IT. The food system is 10 times IT, more than 12 times iron and steel. It's bigger than all the sectors. 40% of all jobs globally are connected to agribusiness. Yet, we have 65% of all arable land in the world, and we are importing food. That is the conundrum that Africa finds itself. Therefore, we need to change it. Increasing agricultural productivity is the way to grow. For example, for maize here, maize, you get about 1 ton, 1.5 tons per hectare. There are countries that get 14 tons per hectare. This is the difference between subsistence agriculture and a sector that's driven by knowledge and science. How do we tie this together? Let me show you quickly four indicators. A lot of folks always say, oh, you know, Nigeria's agri contribution is about 25%, 24%. And I always ask them, do you know really what that means? Look at the other countries, 10%, Malaysia 9%, the UK is 0.6%, agri contribution to GDP, 0.6%, Netherlands 1.6%. And let me tell you something interesting about Netherlands. Netherlands is, I lived there for 6 years, I was teaching at the United Nations. They don't have land, about 17 million people. But Netherlands in 2019 exported food worth 96 billion euros. 96, not million, billion euros. And the agri contribution to GDP was 1.6%. Nigeria, 25%. Employment in agriculture, 35%. Look at the other countries. And you look at those countries and see, well, measure yourself against those countries. In all of history, there is no middle or high income country where agricultural contribution to GDP or employment is more than 10%. You see what I call it a trap. We have been 40 years on those figures, both in terms of agri employment and also in terms of GDP to GDP contribution. What is different is that for manufacturing, for all of those countries, we find 20%, 15%, we have remained under 10% for 45 years. You know, we have some years where it jumps up and down and all of that, but on average, these are the things that we need to change. I always run with figures. I always measure them. Anything you can't measure, you don't understand. The other countries that have made progress, we were all on the same level in the 1960s. In fact, Nigeria's GDP per capita was 6 times that of China in 1980. So you can Google it. Korea, we're all on the same level. Even Vietnam, that had the 20-year war now, has overtaken us in terms of agribusiness. The export of Vietnam in 2019 was $380 billion. $380 billion. Nigeria was $35 billion. Crude petroleum. And the contribution of petroleum to GDP of Nigeria is 10%. So it shows all the sense that we need to move there. And this is the number that tells you the cumulative effect of all of those things. Our income per capita has not ever gone beyond 2,000, 2,200, 2,300. At the same time, others have ramped the way. The fundamental point made by these numbers is that the evolution of new sectors, more pointedly, evolution from agriculture, subsistence agriculture, into manufacturing and value addition, moving from low-level agrarian agriculture to value-adding of economy. The description of the UK or Germany or what you hear as an advanced industrial. Advanced industrial. Africa must industrialize. You don't have to make rockets, but you can 6% growth in the agricultural sector. And that will boost our growth to the kind of thing that the President Tinubu was mentioning. If you grow the agricultural sector faster because of its contribution, we must address the fragile population, talking about the Africa-wide. When we compare the growth, and I come back to the point made by the deputy governor, talking about population growth. This is another trap where we have been. When your population growth outstrips your income growth, you balance it out. You have that subsistence equilibrium. I call it destitution equilibrium. You make money, you spend the same money, you have nothing to save. You remain on the same spot. This is what has happened to us in most of the countries. Dear colleagues, we must bring this stable equilibrium level of low per capita income. We must have this one. 80% of you are all in some farms laboring and not, having enough. This is what we are glorifying. You even find some NGOs say, the urban poor are very hardworking. Of course, they are hardworking. They are dying also. They are working and they are dying. Their children can't even go to school. We must move from low growth economy to an industrial. The transition I propose, and I'm ending, is to shift Africa's agrarian condition to a modern industrialized agricultural manufacturing sector, which will be defined by higher wages, higher productivity, and a demand for more industrial workers. The agenda has to be very clear. And at the African Development Bank, we have been promoting the special agro-industrial process. We are in 11 countries now. Already signed up to it. We raised about $540 million, and we spent 2 years negotiating with bureaucrats. They don't want to sign. Thank God for the new president. We reported that they signed now. So we are the one where we can discuss this money. I'm serious. Many of you in this group, they are partners we know. The bureaucrats will sit there and they play games. 2 years. That special agro was approved by our board in 13th of December 2021. The money just sitting there, we are just arguing with them. Please sign, please, we beg you, God's name. There's a sign. Time to this new intervention. So what we want to target, 6 interrelated objectives. 1, increase agricultural productivity and output. This is really where the heart of the problem. If you put a seed that is producing 1 ton per hectare, and another country put a seed that is producing 20 tons per hectare, you keep going back. In the Netherlands, they have potatoes that you can get 20 tons per hectare. 20 tons. And in some countries, we have 2 tons, 1 ton. Second objective, promote value addition through agro processing. Third objective, enhance income generation and creation in rural. The special agro are going to be based in what we call peri-urban areas. We are not going to put it in the heart of Lagos because Lagos is already congested. We want people to go back to those what we call secondary cities. Itija in Ibadan, for example. By the way, Ogun State has already started their own construction, and we have a friend here who is already constructing their own SADBC in Cross River. We hope before this year will end, we'll see a lot of construction of the special agro-industrial processing zones. 20 other states have applied. How fast we move will depend on the leadership of those states. I give you a number. Vietnam has about 370 industrial parks, and almost 65% of all their GDP come from those industrial parks. It's a no-brainer. You create a zone where you can maximize the congregation of companies located there, electricity, road, everything is there, and then you produce, you compete. The fourth objective is to enhance sustainable agricultural practices and new farming techniques. I can go into all this, but I can share for anyone who wants to have details. I can share this with you. I close with the case of Nigeria's ready-made garment industry. It's a story of arrested development and a story of glory that was lost. It was once a vibrant and dynamic sector. In fact, in the early 60s, we were recording like 70% growth. And the textile ready-made garment sector alone contributed almost 25% of manufacturing labor force in Nigeria. Over 1 million people. All those places now where all you hear is about bandits and stuff, including Zamfara, Kaduna Textile, all of them. They were places, there were zones of production. We had about 115 factories across the cotton textile value chain. They were all engaged in those activities, Aswani and all these places you remember. The Nigerian textile capacity was valued at about $3 billion in 1999. By 2007, there remain only 26 textile companies, employing only 24,000 people. And strangely, it coincided with the rise of China's textile, the rise of Bangladesh textile. We abandoned our production status and we became a consumption nation. In 1972, the World Bank estimated Bangladesh's GDP at about $6 billion. By 2021, Bangladesh GDP was $368 billion, almost rivaling Nigeria. 46 billion came from just one sector, just like the point he was making about the company in Denver. 82% of those income came from ready-made garment. In other words, simple things like making clothes, making your own food can generate for you enormous revenue. But all we do is rely on oil and fight over oil. Nigeria should swap, or Nigeria should regain its lost glory. Africa should regain its lost glory. We must become a production continent. In fact, the CFTA should be a zone of production. Otherwise, as my boss will always say, we end up with a zone that is very well organized for others to dump their goods in. We must industrialize. Thank you very much.
Round of applause, please, Professor.